Angela and I will switch back and forth. If you have questions, will they be typing them in the question area or in the chat? In the chat box, you want to put any questions you might have. So let's start by just clarifying the task at hand. The LEA applications for AEDY programs and AEDY placement have expired for LEAs and IUs, AVTSs. They expired on June 30, so it is now time for us to go in and do a new application that will cover 2 years. If you are a private provider, you will remain on your 3-year cycle, but there is something that you will need to go in and complete some new sections of the application. So for anybody new, we've moved to all things Leader Services System. And so to get to the application, you want to use the link that is showing there on the screen. And after the webinar, should you have any questions on the, not advancing. Can you, okay. Should you have any questions on anything we've gone over, Angela's going to give some information for patent for the specific items that they'll be handling. And then the other items, it'll be John and I and business as usual. So as I mentioned, there's different types of applications that we will be, or you will be going in to take care of. First, as I said, would be a private provider. You already, in most cases, have an approved application. However, as a result of the agreement with the Department of Justice and the Department of Education here in Harrisburg, there were some things that needed to be added to our application system. So you will be required to go in and upload some information, affirm some information, add some information. We're kind of calling that like an addendum. Like I said, the 3-year cycle will continue from the time you were approved till 3 years later is when you will be due to renew again. So that's one type of way that we'll do an application. Then we have LEAs or IUs or AVTSs that run an in-house program. You are on the 2-year cycle that has just expired.
I'm gonna lose my mind.
Wanting to go in and create your application to run for approval to run your in-house program. And then finally, we have those LEAs that are placing students in one of the programs, be it a private provider or an LEA in-house program. And for those, we're going to go over the things that will be required of you. You'll select where you're going to submit your application, send your payment, send your affirmation, and then we'll be approving these applications during the month of August. There we go. And there's just the information that I mentioned for the private provider. I should have been advancing the slides. And we can, I don't know, I think we can push these slides out to folks. There's the information for an in-house program. You got it. And then those are for LEAs placing students in programs. As I said, you're going to go in and select, but it is important that you remember that you are responsible for the education of that student. So you need to, LEAs placing students need to ensure that they're making proper placements, meaning does the student meet one of the 6 AEDY criteria of disregard for school authority, use of controlled substance, violent or threatening behavior, possession of a weapon, commission of a crime on school property, or misconduct that would merit suspension. You're also responsible for ensuring that students with IEPs receive their special ed services, ensuring that EL students are provided with proper EL services, and also ensure that parents have proper information that is it's translated or an interpreter is provided to them so that they understand what is going on. So once you enter the application system, and let me here, there are a series of webinars that Leader has recorded on the different types of applications, the private provider and the in-house and the LEA. So we're going to be sending out an announcement of links to those webinars as well. But I just need you to know that we're not going to be showing those actual screens of the Leader system. I'm just going to be talking through what is expected. So the first step on everyone's application, regardless of the type of application you're doing, is that you're going to have to provide a primary contact, a secondary contact, superintendent, or CEO. Now, if you've already done this application, if I am remembering correctly, this information is going to self-populate through to your renewal. Make sure the information is correct, change it if necessary. And then new is you're going to be assigning a training coordinator. And this is going to be the person from your LEA or from your program that ensures that the appropriate AEDY staff is receiving the necessary training and training information from PD and PATAN. And I just want to stress here, as far as contact information, it is so extremely important, even after your application is approved, that if staff changes with regard to contact information, secondary, even training coordinator, that you go in and update that information immediately. And I say this because that information, contact information, is used to make up the listserv, where those messages that come out to everybody, that information, the contact information, is pulled from the application. So if the staff changes and it's not updated, then the wrong folks are receiving information, such as information about webinars or changes or anything new going on. So again, so important to keep that contact information up to date. Where you are. Oops.
Okay, sorry.
Oh, I can't find it. Oh, sorry.
Okay, we should be good now. Sorry about that. So as Dana shared, we're going to be sending out archived webinars where Leader will take you step by step through the online tool where you'll notice some changes. And some of those changes will be linked resources that provide guidance to you as an LEA as to your responsibility with regards to sending students to an AEDY program and what the responsibilities are of the private providers also. One of the pieces that is very, very much on the forefront of both what the Department of Education is committed to as well as complying with the DOJ is making sure that our English learners are receiving the appropriate English language development when they are placed in an AEDY program. So as you well know, you must have an EL plan, and what we will be doing and what you will see in the online tool is we'll provide you with guidance as to the necessary components of the plan as well as relevant citations, statutes, regulations, etc., that support the expectations that those components are in a plan, as well as what examples might look like. Now, obviously, a student is on a short-time placement in AEDY. The AEDY facility probably doesn't have an identification process in place for ELs, but that does not negate the responsibility of the LEA if they assume a child is a child who's an English learner to ensure that that child receives the appropriate services and assessments to determine whether or not they are an English learner. And obviously this would take place if you have a new student who has come in to place. The responsibilities of the LEA to ensure that students who are ELs are identified and receiving services are consistent whether or not the child is being placed or not. Additionally, the assessment protocols that you would use both in a district need to be in place also when this child is in an AEDY facility. And you would not only be looking obviously at the initial placement around assessing ELs, but also the ongoing progress monitoring to ensure that ELs are making progress aligned to the English language proficiency standards. You will also be responsible for ensuring in this plan how you are providing evidence-based instruction in English language development by a certified ESL program specialist teacher. And you will see in the application, you'll have to note how that person, that person is credentialed. Other pieces that are critical is that the LEA is responsible for the AEDY site to ensure that instruction and social integration are a component. Really want to make sure that students who are ELs who would end up in a AEDY facility would not be in any way segregated, would be socially integrated with their same age peers as appropriate. That there would be adequate translation and interpretation services, that you would be communicating with parents in their preferred mode of communication, that you would describe access to programs and other programs such as gifted, curricular, special ed, etc. So if we have students who are dual identified, an English learner who is also a child with special needs, as identified under Chapter 14 in IDEA, you'd be responsible for collaborating and making sure that in your plan, you speak to how specially designed instruction per Chapter 14 in IDEA are being delivered, that you collaborate with relevant staff to support the EL's academic and linguistic development, and then again, you integrate your ELs with the same age peers as appropriate. There will be additional guidance in the online tool, and you'll receive that, that link to that when you go through the application through Leader Services. So then we talk about students with disabilities. The other major component, as you well know, of the DOJ investigation was specific to students with disabilities, so English learners and students with disabilities. And again, this is just a reminder that a manifestation determination, a process required by the Individuals with Disability Act, which is conducted when considering the exclusion of a student with disability that constitutes a change of placement, must be done before a student would be entered into a AEDY facility. You will see that throughout the application and through the slides, and I think that Dana will probably be able to send out the slides, that you'll see that the definitions are hyperlinked to tools and resources through the patent system that the department would like you to consider as you adapt your own plans locally. Again, once a manifestation determination has been done, then we also need to be looking at the functional behavioral assessment, how you're collecting relevant data to understand what the function of the behavior is, and that you're writing a behavior support plan that addresses the specific functions of those behaviors. So we provide you with lots of publications. The link on this slide will take you to a publication and a worksheet document that would walk an IEP team through the process of that. And the last component around positive behavior support would be specific to the plans. And again, the department wanted to provide you with an exemplar as to what we think a plan should look like. This is what we are rolling out through all LEAs across the Commonwealth through patent per the Bureau of Special Ed. And we really want to focus on a positive behavior support plan. Some of the concerns around programs is a punitive and or punishment focus, and we know from the research that focusing on positive behavior support plan, where we determine the functions of the behavior, we determine replacement skills, and we reinforce those behaviors, those replacement skills, or close approximations of those behavior skills are what we know works the most from the research. So when we look at a positive behavior support plan, we want to look that the individual IEP plan, that the positive behavior support plan is updated, it's integrated into the IEP, and that the behavioral interventions are helpful to develop all components of the plan. For this reason, you'll see in the plan that we're providing you relevant components for Section 6 of the IEP, where you're going to specifically document program modifications, specially designed instruction, related services, and supports for school personnel provided for the child. These may serve as a reminder for the IEP team to consider to be planning and weaving in that positive behavior support plan throughout the child's whole program. It is the LEA's responsibility to ensure that this is happening at the AEDY facility, and the AEDY facility's responsibility to ensure it's happening. Okay, the application. I'm gonna mute myself, Dana.
Okay. So now we are into the application section called partnerships. This is not a new section to the application, and in here we would just like you to record any partnerships you have developed with any outside agencies, organizations, businesses, that would impact the AEDY services being provided. The next section of the application will be the licensing section. For the most part, I think in the past we've only run into programs that have held a private academic license. But if you hold any, anything like a Department of Health or Human Services application or registration number, please record it in this section of the application as well. Program design of the application. As we have made you aware the past 2 years that we are and have moved to the new 990-hour requirement. So all programs must meet the 990-hour requirement and days of operation. In the application, you will be asked to upload your school calendar. You will also be asked to tell us if or about the behavior management program. So if your program uses restraints, you will have to have had your staff trained in some type of behavior management program like safe crisis management or handle with care. So we're asking about that, and then asking you to provide the date when the training was held. If you are using restraints, we're going to ask you to, in the application, to upload a copy of your restraint policy, and then also upload your 2019-20 student handbook as well. The program academic section of the application deals with the actual courses and instructional delivery provided by the program. Statute requires that AEDY programs provide 20 hours of instruction in the course, 20 hours a week of instruction in the core subjects of math, science, English language arts, social studies, and health or life skills. But we know that you are providing much more than that. So you're going to be asked to provide a list of all of the course offerings. And then also new this year is the requirement to provide electives. So we will want a list of all the electives that your program is offering. And if you remember from the past application, there's this grid that you fill in, that you complete an actual student schedule, plugging in start and stop times for the subjects, lunch, free time. The important thing that you note is that that grid must add up to 990 hours or your application will fail. You will not be able to continue unless it adds up to the 990 hours. The next, we can probably buzz through the next couple real quick because it's all about staff. There's sections to add each type of staff, starting with your admin staff. The information you will need for each person is their PPID, their certification date, or if it's well, when we get to the counseling, if it's a license, you'll enter all that information, and then it will the system will create a list of staff. And when you return to the staff list, then you will be required to fill in the dates for the background clearances, which are the state police, the FBI, and the child abuse clearance dates. And then there's also another click on for professional development, where we will need to know the date that the Act 126 training was completed. And if you are using restraints and have a use a behavior management system, again, it's asking for the individual date for each person having received the behavior management training. Yeah, yep. So, yeah. So just going through there, you see the titles are different on each slide. The information is exactly the same. PPID, certificate or license, you're going to need that background information and the professional development information.
Can I ask a quick question? I can't hear anything.
We were going to take questions at the end, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, so as Dana just shared, one of the components of, significant component is how you are ensuring that every single person that is working with students have been trained in appropriate behavioral management supports, and with the focus being on positive behavioral supports. So if as you peruse the DOJ report, you will see that they speak a lot to a multi-tiered system of support for behavior, and they use an example of school-wide positive behavior support, but there are other models out there. From the department's lens, we want to make sure that that the conceptual underpinnings of a multi-tiered system of support for behavior, for positive behavior support, is understood. And then if you choose a model such as school-wide or et cetera, then you kind of have specific targets on how to do that. But one of the cautions is to ensure that all students, not just students with disabilities, but all students have universal interventions. And when we talk about universal interventions, when it comes to behavioral support, we're talking about that in all settings across all students, there are preventative and proactive strategies that are used across the school to systematically teach the rules, to reinforce the rules, and to make sure that students are positively reinforced for appropriately engaging in the expectations of that school environment. What is critical is that when we think about kids that need more significant behavioral supports, too often we focus and go right to tertiary interventions, and we know from the research that those interventions do not work absent of a strong universal approach, which is why the Department of Justice insists that a multi-tiered system of support be in place, meaning that all students are systematically being taught the rules, that all students are having access to the reinforcement schedules that go with compliance of those rules, and that all teachers and adults and individuals in those settings understand those expectations, use preventative de-escalation strategies, and proactively address behaviors before they happen. One of the things, I know a lot of you guys are teachers on the phone, but one of the things that we know clearly is when students are actively engaged in meaningful instruction, they cannot then engage in problematic behavior. Those two behaviors are not congruent, right? So if I'm actually engaged in meaningful instruction that is getting me excited about learning, the likelihood that I'm going to be throwing a chair at you is less, because I'm actually engaged in instruction. And that's what you see in the DOJ report, the need for those universal interventions being in place. So we are here as the patent system, as the support under IDEA in Chapter 14, as well as support from the Department for State AEDY to provide LEAs and AEDY facilities with technical assistance on how to design school-wide systems for behavioral and academic supports. Too often we talk about the behavioral side, but again, as I mentioned, what we need to do is get kids engaged in meaningful instruction where they're actually learning something so that they won't engage in problematic behaviors. So those two models, the academic and the behavioral, go hand in hand. And as the patent system, we are here to provide technical assistance as you conceptualize what this looks like. And it looks different based on different settings, what this looks like in your setting. So that is a component of multi-tiered system of support.
Okay, so for those of you that have had an opportunity to play around a little bit in the AEDY referral system, this is a separate part of the Leader online system. For the start of the new school year, all referrals must come through this system, and that system is going to be assigning students a 45-day presumptive exit date unless a student is serving the terms of an expulsion. So in this section of the application, we're talking about the clear, measurable exit criteria that is going to be created in the positive behavior support plan to determine if a student is meeting the exit criteria on or before the 45-day presumptive exit date. And to do this, you will be required, as in the past, to administer a formal periodic review, which is a formal documentation, just stating, the goals and the criteria. Have they been met? Have they not been met? An explanation of the review of the child's behavior. Remember, as always, students cannot be held for academics or attendance. AEDY programs are about behavior. Behaviors got the students placed. Their behaviors will get them back to the general education setting. So once, if you have determined that the student, through the formal periodic review, is meeting their behavioral goals, then you will need to create a transition plan for that student. And each transitioning student must have a documented plan stating the specifics of what will happen. And we understand they're different for different students, different for different programs and organizations, simply because it's kind of tough to send a student back in the middle of a marking period. So you might be just working on for, you're 2 weeks short of the marking period. Maybe you're going to work on first just now allowing that student to commingle or participate in extracurricular activities would be the first step of the transition. And then at the beginning of the marking period, the student actually fully goes back to the general education setting. That way, if a problem arises between the start of the transition plan and the end of the transition plan, it's very easily, the student can be pulled back into AEDY without having to go back to the beginning and create a totally new referral and plans. You just pull the student back and figure out what went wrong. The application is also going to request program evaluation data. This is currently the same data that is submitted for end of year reporting. If your program is running for 3 or more years, you'll be asked to upload 3 years of that data if it's available. And I believe the final section then is just asking if your company or organization offers runs additional programs. Like I'm going to use an example of an IU that might have 2 programs. You would just state that you have this program, but you also run the other program. Or if you're a private provider, you might run this AEDY program, but you also run an emotional support program. We just like to know what our providers, what other programs or I'm losing my train of thought. What other things they have in place in their location. Yes, 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 yes. Now, before we get into the questions and before Angela, I kind of saw bits and pieces of questions floating by, and it seemed like a lot of folks were saying, why do we have to see this if we're not a private provider? I think LEAs really have to take a step back and realize that they, no matter where they're sending their students, you are ultimately responsible for what that provider or that program is providing to your students. They are your students. Even when they're placed there, they're not unenrolled from your district. They are your students, and you need to take ownership for what is being provided to that student. So that's a lot about the importance of hearing this the whole webinar on all 3 sections. But I will state that the information that we talked about back in the contact section, which is, those 4 contact folks. In there is where we talk about the complaint process. We also talk about the we talk about the EL plans. We talk about the positive behavior support plans, special ed. That's all in the contact section of the application, regardless of what type of application you're submitting. And you'll also find that in that application, new this year, which we seem to somehow have missed completely, was the complaint resolution process. And so everyone must have a local level complaint resolution process in place. That is, if you are an LEA that sends students to a private provider, you as an LEA must have a local complaint resolution process. Because what if that student or the family wants to file a complaint just because they're being placed? It has nothing to do with the program they're being placed. Nothing's happened to them. There's no issue at the place where they're going. The issue is with why they're being placed. Therefore, the LEA must have a local complaint resolution process. It must also, if you look on the PDE website under AEDY, we'll give you a sample local complaint resolution process. And then there will also be a link to information, because if the complaint is not resolved at the local level, the next step for the complainant is to file their complaint with PDE. So that would be the second step of the process. You're also, as far as your complaint resolution, you must post it on your website somewhere. It should be easily translated or have translated versions available on the web. I think that it's important that when you have the first, that informal hearing with the students and the parents, that you give them the option to look at that complaint resolution process You want to add anything to that, Angela, regarding the complaint process? Oops. Good? Nope.
Your speaker. Yeah, so as Dana said, and we have this in our notes, we just need to go back and make sure throughout the application and the webinars that will be shared with you from Leader Services, there are links to model examples. So here's what a model complaint, local complaint process would look like, and then this is what it looks like when it gets elevated at the state level. We're going to actually take your questions today, and we were and make some modifications to the presentation so that we then, when we send out both the Leader Services piece, we'll also have hyperlinks to all of these resources. So we'll send out a brand new, like this is kind of our let's talk and let's get this organized, but we will send out, we're going to sit here probably today and then archive a presentation that doesn't have feedback. And we'll make sure that you get the updated hyperlinks to both the complaint process and all of the resources that I mentioned. So as Dana said, you know, the Department of Education is going to be continuing to be your point, Dana and John, when it comes to complaint monitoring and LEA level support. The Department of Education has asked that Patton provide support to Dana and John in the context of professional development and technical assistance specific to multi-tiered systems of support for behavior, your L plans, positive behavior support plans, functional assessment, manifestation determinations, and anything else that you have questions specific to supporting students with disabilities in the context of AEDY facilities or English language learners. We have created a Patton-specific AEDY email where we will monitor that on a daily basis, and we'll have Patton consultants with expertise in the areas you identified contact you directly. So think of this as like a one-stop shop to get on-site technical assistance and support to your LEAs specific to anything to do with supporting students with disabilities in the context of AEDY facilities, as well as English language learners or English learners. So we'll work through that, and looking forward to supporting you in those efforts. And as Dana said, we know that students who end up in AEDY facilities are in there because of behavior, but note that when we provide technical assistance on site around multi-tiered systems of supportive behavior, we never negate the academic side, because in order for us to truly address behavior universally, we need to make sure students are engaged academically in meaningful tasks that are actually going to promote their learning, which is why there's a real explicit connection on the amount of hours that students are receiving around academics. We need to make sure that our students are receiving the best, most rigorous, engaging, scaffolded instruction so that they don't have the time to engage in the problematic behaviors. So although we say MTSS behavior, in the context of our technical assistance, we think about multi-tiered systems of support twofold: behavior and academics. So that's the Patton slide, and I believe the next one, Dana, is, and the contact information for Dana and John is at the beginning. But as I mentioned, we're going to be rolling out information with really streamlined versions, step-by-step through the Leader Services model with hyperlinks to all the resources, as well as we'll update this webinar. We'll make some adjustments based on the questions. So I think we probably could go ahead and start to scan some of the questions. And Sergio, I don't know if you saw a consistent theme that you wanted to share with us, or?
Yeah, let's go through. So the first question, can the primary contact also be the training coordinator?
Absolutely.
So Dana just mentioned, yes, the primary contact, the question was, could the primary contact be the training coordinator? And Dana indicated that that is allowable.
Other question, how do we get login credentials for Leader Services applications?
So the next question was, how do we get login credentials for Leader Services? Dana?
Email either John or I.
Email Dana Clauser or John Esposito.
So training coordinator for LEAs, placing in AEDY, who's responsible for the training?
So training coordinators for LEAs.
Placing in AEDY.
Placing in AEDY. Well, I think as Dana said, and I'm going to let her speak to this, but ultimately the LEA is always responsible. Now, what contracts you have with your AED providers and what they do, but ultimately as the LEA, you're responsible to ensure that those students are receiving the appropriate services. Dana, do you have anything to add to that? You kind of said that already.
Yeah, not specifically. I would just you know, if it's, to me, I'm thinking like an EL. If you are placing EL students, then I would think if Patton is providing something around EL students, the LEA and the provider should both send someone or have someone on that webinar. You just don't leave it to the provider.
Right. And I mean, ultimately, the LEA, you have a responsibility to ensure that the AEDY facility has a L plan that emulates what you have at the district level. Now, as we said, there might be pieces that are not specific to that, you know, but ultimately, your plan at the LEA level to support your English language learners, the majority components of that should be in place. You know, I know there's some nuances around identification, but I mean, hypothetically, you could have a new student who came here from Bhutan and engages in a problematic behavior, and you didn't have a chance yet to assess them, and they are an L, and you believe they're an L. I mean, so there are ultimately the LEA is responsible. I think the way I like to think of it, given my special ed background, is, you know, if I'm a school district and I send a child to an emotional support program in an IU run program, I am responsible as the LEA. It's the same concept. You as the LEA are ultimately held responsible to ensure that these pieces are in place. Anything else, Sergio?
There's like time.
Okay.
So does the LEA need to go into private provider details?
I think they're referring to the application. Do they need to go into the private provider part of the application? I would say not necessarily, but I believe that the LEA and the private provider should have already sat down and have an agreement that you know what the private provider, how their process works, what they do, what they provide for ELs, what they provide for special ed students. You know, just asking them those questions, the things that you know you must have, you know, have that conversation. The first time the LEA coordinator and the private provider coordinator meet shouldn't be the day of the AEDY monitoring. You should have a consistent relationship ongoing with the program.
Okay, here's another one. So if you're a private provider, do you need to upload the EL plan, or do you upload the district's EL plan?
My understanding was whoever is providing the EL services, it is their plan. So if the private provider is providing the EL services, they should have an EL plan, but the district should have already seen and signed off on and agreed on that plan.
Correct. And I think, I mean, a good way to be is, I mean, obviously an AEDY provider could have 20 districts that are sending their students. So ultimately, the AEDY provider would have to do their due diligence to make sure that the components that is in the sending LEAs, that is in their plan. And obviously, when you see the example guidance that we've provided and we'll roll out to you guys, you'll see that there are pieces that we all know. Do you have assessments in place that identify and progress monitor students' acquisition of English language proficiency? Do you have evidence-based instructional practices? Are you providing parents with communication in their preferred language? Are you providing translation and other services? So, I mean, this isn't, you know, significant departure from what would be in the district's L plan, but ultimately, as Dana said, the AEDY would have to do their due diligence to ensure those components are met, and the LEA needs to do their due diligence to make sure that the AEDY providers that they're contracting with for their students are meeting those specific requirements.
An LEA is using a private provider. Does the private provider go in and upload the handbook and calendar, or is the LEA responsible?
Okay, so a private provider, that the LEA placing the student, that would not be in your part of the application. It would be in the provider's part of the application. And what most providers I've seen, they will, you know, they may serve multiple districts, but they'll pick one in particular, that's the district whose calendar they follow. And most private providers you'll find have their own handbook. They won't follow they'll have their own set of rules for students while in that program, as opposed to an in-house program that will most often have the district handbook, and maybe like just a subsection of that handbook will be for the AEDY program.
Okay, so Jenny,
If someone previously completed the application and none of the information rolled over, do they really have to go back and refill the information?
Email me and I
Repeat the
will.
question.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry. So can you say it again so
The
Jen will
question
repeat
is,
it?
previously completed an application in the system, none of the information rolled over, do I have to go back in? to
So-
refill?
Okay, someone previously completed the application in the system, because it did open up on Monday, and they are saying that none of the information rolled over. So if you want to email me directly, I will reach out to Leader and see what's up with that. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe not everything is going to be rolling over, but I thought most of it was, especially contact information and things like that.
Are LEAs monitoring private providers?
Our LEA is monitoring private providers. The Department of Education will be monitoring private providers as well as LEAs. However, LEAs have a responsibility to do their due diligence to ensure the components that are required are happening in the AEDY facilities that they are contracting. So when we think monitoring, we think Dana and John going out and doing monitoring. But ultimately, if you want to use that term monitoring, ultimately an LEA has a responsibility to ensure that the AEDY providers are doing what they need to do in order to comply with the law.
Please clarify exactly what an LEA needs to complete when we're potentially placing a student in the future.
Student referral system. Yeah, so that's, Dana's going to speak to that, but as I said, we will have Leader Services will be rolling out specific links and videos to everything you will need to do as a district versus a private provider, but specifically a district, you will have to be responsible for doing a student referral system, which is different than what you're doing with the application system, and the training materials that will come from Leader will explicitly walk you through that as an LEA as to the expectations. Dana, do you have anything to add to that?
Just that as an LEA, you have a responsibility to complete an application. If you're placing or referring students to a private provider or in-house AEDY program, and then you also have the responsibility, just like you did a paper referral, you will have the responsibility to do that online. And we understand that many of you that are on this webinar are not the folks that physically do that referral. So the folks that do the referral will need to access the training on using the referral. So it's important that you pass that information along to those folks and let them know that they're going to have to be doing that training. And we have been talking about this now for the better part of 2 years. So it shouldn't be new news if you have been following our webinars and attending the trainings.
But just so that, and because we know folks who are coordinating these efforts at the district level change quite frequently. Dana was sharing that, lots of times people aren't the same people. So just so you know, the department, in order to do their due diligence to ensure that they're complying not only with the DOJ, but what they believe is best for students across the Commonwealth, will be sending out a pen link that will go to all of the chief academic officers. So your chief superintendents, who is a commissioned officer of the state, ultimately is responsible to ensure they're complying with the law. So a pen link with all of the materials that we're sharing today, updated materials, as well as the Leader Service training and all the pertinent contact information should be going out to superintendents across the Commonwealth probably within the next week. So we are hoping to really also make sure that the folks in leadership roles at the district level are understanding their expectations when it comes to their role in ensuring students who are placed in these facilities are being served appropriately.
Is the training that was spoken of only for EL?
So there's a question specific to, is training only for EL? The patent system here is here to support you in meeting the needs of students in AEDY facilities. And that goes from MTSS behavior and academics to ensure universal practices, as well as more tiered interventions and data are in place, as well as supports for English learners and how you do a good job with integrating students and making sure that they have the right supports. So if you need specific technical assistance in those areas, you just need to use the email that's on the slide in front of you, contact us, and a patent consultant will contact you to determine what the best approach is to meet the needs of your LEA and or the private provider.
As a private provider, my AEDY application was completed and improved within the last month. If I have to complete a new section or addendums, where would I find these on leadership website?
So the question is, as a private provider, I updated my application and amended it within the last month. If there are additional things that I need to do, where will I find that, or how will I know that? Dana?
All private providers must go in and complete the addendums or the new sections of the application. You'll just log in just like you would if you were going in to change your contact information. You'll go in and you'll see your application and you'll see the sections that are blank.
Okay, anything else?
Do we need school board policy or just a district procedure for the complaint process?
That is a local level decision.
So the question is, do we need a board policy or just a local policy for a complaint process? And ultimately that's a local decision, but again, that's a local decision, but I would consult with your district solicitor and others to ensure that you're in compliance.
As an LEA, do we have to enter all the information for the private provider?
So the question is, as an LEA, are they responsible for inputting the information on the private provider, Dana?
No, the private provider information will be input by the private provider.
From the EL slide in the presentation, it said, for guidance, see the requirement and program recs for the EL document. Where can we get this document?
That document will be hyperlinked in the application. We will also send it out when we send out this PowerPoint so that you have that resource. But it's components that were on the slide: identification of ELs, assessment of ELs, progress monitoring of ELs, evidence-based instruction of ELs, providing ELs with, and parents of ELs with communication in their preferred language.
When will Leader be rolling out presentation additional info?
We spent all day Tuesday. I think Leader spent about 8 hours here on Tuesday here at Patton, recording multiple webinars that included not only the application process, but also the student referral system. And we anticipate, we're in the process right now of editing those videos, getting them captioned, hopefully by Friday, if not early Monday. We anticipate that all of those links will be sent out, if not by the end of this week, early next week. We see communication going out in 2 formats, one through Dana, who will send it out through your points of contact, another as a pen link officially to superintendents across the Commonwealth, so they're very clear as to their expectations.
Let me clarify, because I did see some folks saying that they're a little confused by this whole process. What Leader has prepared is a brief webinar on what to do if you're a private provider and you need to go in and do your addendum. They've recorded a brief webinar on what to do if you're an AEDY in-house program, an LEA that runs an in-house program, explains just what you need to do. And then a third one on what to do if you're an LEA that places students with a private provider or an in-house program. And it explains just what you need to do. And I think that's the clarification that you needed. What Angela and I are giving you today is just the content that's expected in the different sections of the application. And then as far as the referral form, as far as I know, they broke that into 3 sections as well. There'll be how to prepare the referral form. And then if you're the provider, what to do when you accept the referral form. And then the third piece would be what to do when the student returns on the referral form. So it'll be much clearer once those come out.
When must the online application be implemented?
When must the online, so the question is, when must the online application?
I believe it was August 4th is that a Friday?
August 4th. I believe so. Yes. So it's August 4th.
Yes.
And thank you, Matt Thomas, who did a clarification. A director from PDE, school districts can only place students with disabilities or English learners into alternative disciplinary programs that are approved by the state. That is correct. If a student with special education has not made progress by their presumptive exit date, can the team determine a new presumptive exit date for the student?
Ultimately, the IEP team makes those determinations. Obviously, I hope they would be giving due consideration to requirements under IDEA and Chapter 14.
Also,
No, I was that IEP specific?
Mhm.
Okay.
Also, can students with special education start the school year in an AEDY program if the district AEDY program determined they still need supports in the program from the previous school year?
So ultimately, the IEP team makes the determination, and that IEP team would determine whether or not that was the appropriate placement. Obviously, given the gravity of placing a student with a disability in an AEDY program, the expectation is that the LEA would give due consideration to all expectations around IDEA and Chapter 14. But ultimately, the IEP team makes the determination as to how the student will be served.
This next one is a multi-part question, so please bear with us. There are 6 questions. In the assurances, it requires that teachers and private providers who do not hold certifications be entered into PIMS as non-certified educators. Is there guidance for this process?
Dana, I don't believe there is guidance. They would just simply enter those educators in, correct? There's nothing, if they're not educated, there's nothing specific to that, right?
Second part, is there an invoice in the application that we can process through our accounts, payable, finance, or office?
When your application is,
So the question is specific to an invoice and how they could go about payment. Dana?
when the application is submitted, it generates an email that tells how much is owed and where to send it. Now, I will say that if you happen to be one of the programs that sent or submitted their application yesterday or Monday, that function was not turned on, but my understanding was that Leader was going to go back and reissue those confirmations that the application was received, and here's what you need to do. If you have a problem with that, like you didn't get it or you didn't get that email, just send me an email and we'll get it worked out for you.
So there was, sorry, go ahead, Sergio.
Because of the timing of the release of the application, can LEA submit draft policies to the school board after the approval of the policies?
Yes, I don't, that would, obviously most folks don't have a July board, so, you know, they would be responsible for providing draft and then updating once they have board approved policies. There was another specific question about what is requiring PDE to do to make these changes. And ultimately, most folks know that there was Department of Justice, there was a complaint against the Commonwealth, and there's specific agreement that the Department of Education has with the Department of Justice. If you would like to see an update on that, I think you simply just Google DOJ and PDE, and you'll find a most recent agreement as of, I believe, April 2019 or something like that.
Yeah.
So if you have any specific concerns about that, but what I will say is nothing that we're really talking about here is something, I mean, ultimately the department is responsible for ensuring that these pieces are in place, but these pieces specifically and students with disabilities have always been the law. They are a requirement. So it really isn't that this is significantly new with regards to the law. These have always been requirements.
Couple. Will LEA's private providers receive provisional approval if the school year starts and no approval additional items are needed?
I'm gonna say yes. In the past, that's how we operated. If we find an issue with your application, we will work with you to work it out. you wouldn't just sit there unapproved.
In the same note, if an LEA uses a private provider, can their approval be held up because of possible issues with the private provider's application?
I think ultimately, as Dana said, we recognize that there are these changes. I mean, it's a short window of time. I think the department's ask of you is to do your very best to, in good faith, get this information together. And I know that the department will be working to support you, and we'll be here as patent to support. And ultimately, the goal is not to deny anyone's applications as long as they're doing what is right and expected in support of our students across the Commonwealth and are complying with federal and state law.
And in the past, we haven't stopped anyone from placing students as long as you have submitted an application. That to me is, it's with us, we're going to work with you to get it. If it's not exactly 100% where it should be, we're going to work with you to get it there. So I would say no one would be held up. So if you're an LEA and your private provider application is not totally, as long as they've submitted it, you will be fine.
When will the new updated guidelines be available?
They need to be in place by September 30th, if I'm remembering the DOJ agreement correctly.
Last question. Does the district have to do an online referral for a student returning from the 2018-19 school year?
Let's do
Dana,
that again.
the question is, does the district have to do a new referral for a student who is returning from the 2018-2019 school year?
You need to do an online referral. It's not brand new. You would take the paper referral,
Correct.
and just transfer the information to the online referral.
So the information that Dana said is, yes, you would need to do it because everything needs to go into the online referral. You would take the paper referral and put it in the online system. Note that this online system is what the department is going to use to look at data, look at whether or not students are being disproportionately sent to particular AEDY facilities, whether or not too many Ls or students with disabilities, or students of color are being identified. This is information that's going to get filtered at the state level, and then obviously it's information that the feds are going to want to see. So therefore, we're trying to get everything systematized and electronic so that we can drive out the types of data reports that we're going to need to do, and that will then drive monitoring and all of the pieces that need to take place per the agreement. Okay. All right, Dana, do you have anything else that you'd like to close with? Or?
No, I don't. I'm just, as I've conveyed to you multiple times in the past 2 years with the new system, the changeover, I just ask that you, for your patience, and we're here to work with you, not against you, and just reach out with your questions. And if there's something that wasn't answered here today that you'd like to talk more about, feel free to reach out to us. We are trying to make this as clean cut and seamless as possible. As well as I do, anytime you move to something new, you're going to have those bumps in the road. But we are here to work together and get through them all. So.
Okay, and again, specific requests for technical assistance, feel free to connect directly with AEDY at patent.net, and we'll be in contact. So thank you very much. Stay tuned. We'll be sending out all of these updated links from Leader, as well as the slideshow, and again, here to support you as you go through this process. Thank you very much.
And the link for the new online referral form will be posted as well.
The online referral form is in the system.
So
It's
just
the
so
same
folks
link.
know, people are asking about the online referral form. It is in the same system. So if you haven't seen that, feel free to reach out to Dana or John, but it is in the same system. And again, the webinars that are being provided by Leader will walk you through all of those pieces, show exactly where they are, how to complete it, what the expectations are in each of the components of the system. Okay? Thank you.